So in 1945, a UFO crashed with little beings inside, and these little boys went up to it and were able to see the beings. So there is no protocols for contact. It is not that easy. It was 11 o'clock at night. I didn't know what was going on. I just went there and I saw from far away a 10-foot tall man that was standing against a tree. And the man was in front of me speaking in an echo type word. It wasn't in my head. I could hear it in all of the forest. I didn't know what to do. I was looking at him. He was looking at me. He says in a robotic voice, "Thank you." He turns around and he walks into the forest. We all saw the same thing, but everybody did not hear the same thing. So I asked Ricardo about this, and he said, he's thanking you for the work you're going to do from here on in, not for the past.
Paola Harris, welcome on Just Tap In. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
Talking to you. I'm in Colorado. It's snowing. My office has a window that I have a bird feeder, and there's all these birds because it's snowing. They're at the bird feeder eating, the seeds that I put out for them. So Colorado is very, very much nature. It's the Rocky Mountains. And what it does, what I do as a journalist feeds my mind, but watching birds from a window in beautiful snowy Colorado it feeds my soul. And I think, Emilio, we have to feed both.
We do. And to really set the stage and where this all started, why was 1947 the year that marks the beginning of the UFO era?
Well, it doesn't. What marks the beginning of the UFO era is the book that Jacques Vallée and I just wrote called Trinity. Here's the book, Trinity. And my birthday was in 1945, and the atomic bomb was in 1945, and the first crash was in 1945. And the book Trinity talks about two little boys that happened to see a UFO crash 1 month after the atomic bomb explosion in San Antonio, New Mexico. And it was 3 miles from the Owl Barn Cafe where Oppenheimer, who was part of the Manhattan Project, had his cabin and where everybody met. And I've been to the Owl Barn Cafe, 25 times. This is a story that took me 10 years to do. And 13 miles from ground zero, which Oppenheimer called Trinity because there are three little mountains. So in 1945, a UFO crashed with little beings inside, and these little boys went up to it and were able to see the beings. And then it took 7 days for the Army Air Force to clean it up. The thing that you have to understand, and I'm a college professor, a high school teacher and a professor. All my work is at Rice University, Houston. All the audio tapes of the 7 books I've written, everything is in Houston. So I think of it as an academic study. This is before Kenneth Arnold. Kenneth Arnold coined the term UFO, flying saucer, when he saw those craft in Mount Rainier. So it's before 1947. It's before Roswell, which is in July 1947. This is 1945. So then what we have to do is connect the dots. And we have to see why anybody's looking at us right after the atomic bomb explosion. And this case is so big that Jack and I wrote a book called Trinity with all the details. And when it's children, and these children are now the one that is a survivor because I interviewed both boys. They were 6 and 9. The 9-year-old is still alive, and he's 88 years old. And I was just in Los Angeles with him. He's 88, so we found him. And he gave testimony to Denny Sheehan, the lawyer for the Disclosure Project. And Denny Sheehan was able to question him in detail. And of course, his name is Jose Padilla. They're Hispanic. They live in New Mexico. Jose Padilla and the 6-year-old was Remy Baca. So when for me, I have to look at it chronologically. When was the first recorded crash? And it was in July 18th of it was August 18th of 1945, because July 16th is the atomic bomb explosion. So what happened, I think, to the Earth, if you're studying this, I mean, really studying this like a journalist, you have to see that the idea of nuclear is very much in the minds of whatever contact we have. The fact that in 1969, UFOs shut down 10 missiles that had nuclear warheads at Malmstrom Air Force Base. I interviewed Jean-Charles Duboc that in 1980, Air France, the UFO was over a nuclear installation. That today I've seen full film footage of UFOs in Ukraine, in Israel, in Russia, in China, and you come to the conclusion they're not on vacation. They're watching a planet that has very, very dangerous capability of self-destruction.
So that was the main reason all of this followed after we opened Pandora's box with nuclear energy.
Yeah, you used the word Pandora's box. I use it too. But that's just the A bomb, Emilio. Do you realize that we tested the H bomb, which is 10 times the atomic bomb? We tested it. The United States used Nevada. The French used the Bikini Atoll in Pangatofen, the Pacific. They did H-bomb tests there. They did 800 of them. The United States also did some off the coast of Argentina. H-bomb is much, much more powerful than the A-bomb. And so if we're doing this, and it's like a chess game, the only way you can win this is to do checkmate, right? We have it, they have it, we have it, as much as whatever warring nations are playing this war game of chess, where the only way you could win is to have checkmate. It's, I think, something that the cosmic cultures are watching. Who's going to mess up first?
And I see you use the word cosmic cultures, which I believe Einstein also used that terminology. And what do they mean by culture in the context of something cosmic?
God, you're so good. I'm so glad you mentioned this, because in the book Trinity, I make a point of the MJ-12 document that is listed for June of 1947 before Roswell. So they're talking about another crash. They're talking about San Antonio, because Roswell hasn't happened yet. Einstein and Oppenheimer in that document, write to Truman and say, we got a problem. UFOs are over the bomb sites. And they say, Truman, and the name of the document, and I'd be glad to give it to you, and you can give it to your public. It's a 4-page document. It's called Relationships with Celestial, with an R, Celestial Inhabitants. So it talks about the Einstein's idea was that they were cosmic cultures. And in the document, the MJ12 document, they're going, well, United Nations can't handle it. And I know they can't because I just did a lecture on the United Nations resolutions. There were 2 of them, and the United Nations doesn't even want to talk about it. So in the document, Einstein calls them cosmic cultures and says, maybe we have something to learn from them, or maybe, we give them a piece of land. I mean, it's really interesting. And it's a real Einstein document because it was given to Ryan Wood. And he lives down the street from me, and he told me that he had it forensically examined. I said, what's that? And he goes, forensics is the way Einstein talks, the paper, that typewriter, all of this stuff. So Einstein and Oppenheimer, of course, if Oppenheimer has his cabin 3 miles from the crash site, and it happened a month later, you think and they didn't know what they were looking at because we don't have Kenneth Arnold yet. There's nothing in the media yet. So the little boys, when they saw the avocado-shaped craft, they had no idea about flying saucers or aliens. And when the young boys that cleaned it up, that went there to hoist the craft on a flatbed truck, they had never seen anything. It could have been an airplane to that. So we need to look at this historically. And I admire Einstein for calling them cosmic cultures, because my own thinking is that what was inside a lot of these craft is artificial intelligence, AI, little beings created biologically that have artificial intelligence to fly the plane. And we're making a whole big, thing about a whole big creation that ufology is little gray aliens. It isn't. It isn't. From my studies in Latin America, the space brothers are people like us. From my studies of the early 50s and 60s, they are people like us. And the idea of artificial intelligence being used is something we're even considering when we go to Mars. I mean, it's logical. They're robots and or clones. Colonel Corso told me they were clones. So we can't make a media circus of little gray aliens when we really probably have cultures that God created just like us all over the universe that are a little bit smarter than we are.
You brought up Colonel Philip Corso, who was research and development at the Pentagon and was in charge of the Roswell crash pieces. And one of the things I've heard you say about that is that what they found there was an alternative energy system that would bring down the whole entire economic foundation of the planet. What was really going on there?
Well, let me say, first of all, I hope your listeners read, because there's 2 books they should get. One called Magic Eyes Only, and it's 104 crashes written by Ryan Wood. And I found the San Antonio crash, because he does it chronologically. I mean, these crashes started in the 1800s. And he's got all over the world. Virginia, Brazil is a crash. There's so many crashes. And it isn't Roswell. We made Roswell the mecca of everything. But if we have 100 crashes, then we have to look at all of it. And the second book Ryan Wood just put out, Emilio, is called The AI Ufologist. And it's the first book written by artificial intelligence, okay? He put all the data in. Ryan and Bob Wood were extraordinary researchers. Bob just died. His father just died 90 years old. But they got the MJ12 documents, so they knew what was going on. And when you put all this data, and I'm pretty much sick of doing data. We have so much data, we don't need disclosure. It's happened. When you put it into a computer and you put artificial intelligence there and you ask the right questions, the artificial intelligence will answer the questions according to the data. So everybody in their library should have the AI ufologist, both books by Ryan Wood. And Colonel Philip Corso was, when he got the now remember, 47 is Roswell. And remember, I just told you there was a crash in 1945. Do you think they threw everything away? It went to Los Alamos craft with everything inside, except the one piece that the 9-year-old took from the inside. That piece is in Mexico City right now. But anyway, the thing is, that's all stuff somebody wants. So there was the Army Air Force, so maybe the Air Force got that. The Army gets Corso stuff in 1961. 1961 is when the Kennedy administration is going on. So Corso, that was an intelligence officer, head of the intelligence room. I walked him all over Rome, saw his office, where he stayed. I was with him in Rome. He was not able to speak in the United States because there was a lawsuit against the book. So I brought him to Italy. I was living in Italy 1994 to 2007. He told me that in 1961, he had those things at research and development in the Pentagon. But that's under Kennedy. So he's talking to Robert Kennedy. So Robert is going to talk to his brother, Jack, the president. So they knew, these guys knew in the 1960s that there were such things as UFOs. The Army was back engineering night screening devices, the laser, high tenacity fibers and everything. When I first met Corso in 1997, he said to me, because I asked him about the autopsy, the Santilli autopsy footage, he said to me, that looks real to me, he said, because in the book I wrote about Colonel Corso, Conversations with Colonel Corso, people can get it on Amazon. They can get this book on Amazon. He said that part of the artifacts was the lid, or the what do you call it, lens they peeled off the eyes. That is not what the little gray alien with the big black eyes. That's not an eye. He said you would peel that off, and if you look at the Santilli footage, it has a pupil underneath. That is a light collector. And Colonel Corso told me that when he had that, he would walk up and down the halls of the Pentagon and he could see in the dark. So he says, I mean, naturally he's bragging because he's Army. He said, well, thanks to our having that, we were able to make night screening devices for our soldiers in Vietnam. Now, Vietnam is in the 70s, okay? And so if you study this and don't look at it like it's some kind of, media circus or some kind of entertainment, and you start putting together all of the stuff that's happened with the original sources instead of, 5-minute, podcasts or YouTubes or anything. Go to Colonel Philip Corso, what he said he did, what he said he saw, and then start putting this together. You say, well, the reason why you can't really talk about it, Emilio, is because it's gone into the military-industrial complex. And why would they want to tell you that they've been lying to you since 1945 because they have all these toys they're making money off? And my interviews with Colonel Corso are on my YouTube and my streaming TV channel, where he said, and it's really sad, Emilio, he said, well, we used them for weapons of war first, and then we gave them to the general public. Yeah, we make them weapons of war. We use a laser for weapons of war. But he said something that looked like a black flashlight that was a laser. He put long loways on it, and he said it could cut in surgery, but it could close it too. It could suture. And I thought,
Hmm.
well, a lot of these things, instead of using them as weapons, we could be using them for medical purposes. So it's a very tricky, complex situation. And I know you understand.
Yeah. When you mentioned that there has been over 100 documented crashes, I'm wondering almost like what made these crafts crash in the first place. And I know that the more you've understood this UFO phenomenon, you've understood that most of it is dimensional. So I'm wondering what caused the crash in the first place if these crafts can pop in and out of dimensions almost instantaneously because they understand the fabric of space and time, or time space. Hello, beautiful family. Quick one today. I just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you that have subscribed to this channel. Your subscription means more than you know. Even though it's free, what you're doing is you're empowering a whole channel to be able to do this every single day and continue showing up in the way that we can with all of our resources on hand. Thank you for contributing to the growth of this channel, for sharing it with the people that you love, for creating a conscious movement of individuals that are seeking the sovereignty and the divinity of their soul. This is why we're here. And if you haven't already and you're enjoying this content, I invite you now to look below on that little button that says subscribe and welcome you properly to this community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are and being pure love and radiating that with everyone that you see. Back to the episode.
Well, there's a lot of answers. There's never one answer to this. I believe that the ones in New Mexico, and Colonel Corso talked about this. He talked about two things. Because in New Mexico, there was the San Antonio crash, 1947. 1945. There's Roswell, 1947. There's Aztec. There's Corona. The New Mexico area is a military area. And at that time, they had moving radar. Radar you could move with. It was, I think it was on wheels, or a way of moving. It was outside where you could move it. And I think that radar interfered with the propulsion system of the craft for New Mexico. For New Mexico. All right. In 1952, the Battle of Los Angeles, we shoot them. And if you listen to Stephen Greer, and his testimony of his witness, his whistleblowers that are down in the South Pole, we're shooting at them with microwave weapons. So we either shoot them down, they either and I'm convinced there's a weather anomaly too in New Mexico. They have horrible, horrible, horrible thunderstorms. And in the case of 1945, there had just been a thunderstorm. Maybe there's part of this where they want to give us a gift, and they want some of these things to come down, so they give us the technology. But as I was talking to Clifford Stone, who did 12 crash retrievals, he said he said that some of this is just interactions in dimensions. Colonel Corso believed there were portals, and that they come in and out of portals. So it's very complex. When you have that many crashes, when you have that much stuff going on, one answer doesn't fit all of it. I know in Roswell there was a violent thunderstorm just before the crash, and Colonel Corso believed that it created a whirlwind of electricity where there was a portal. And in the book, he tells me that he saw a craft himself at White Sands 10 years later, so he thinks there were two that crashed together. And so there is no one answer. What happened in Virginia, Brazil? I have no idea. But that craft was in trouble. And the Virginia case, which is amazing because it's not your typical reptilian, gray, or Nordic, It's little beings that had red skin and uh, kind of um, protuberances on top of their head. Those guys were in trouble. I mean, they ran through Virginia. The little beings ran. One of them was taken to the hospital. So you can't make one answer for all of this. The person that I want to talk to is somebody that studied all of it, so I can have a conversation. But Emilio, the sad part about it, and I'm going to talk about my. Here's the Colonel Corso book in Italian. He had contact with that being in 1957 at White Sands. I wrote it in English too. I have some 28 interviews with what people told me and connecting the dots, which I just had translated into Japanese. I can't do this. Those people have to tell me what's going on because I'm not the source. I'm not making this up. This is not, I've got everybody from Edgar Mitchell, who walked on the moon, to Zachariah Sitchin, to John Mack, to Jacques Vallée, Alan Hynek, with whom I worked for 6 years. I worked with him. He's an astronomer. I've got what they told me because I want to study it, Emilio, like a professor studies it, like a teacher studies it. I mean, I was just in Los Angeles, and three-quarters of my colleagues, people that are in the field, had not even read Trinity, and I'm going, "What do you read your own book and you figure out what's going on in the world?" I have a library of 300 books, and I have read them all. Otherwise, how do I know? I can't do it all. How do I know what's going on? So your questions are really good. And in this interview, I'm hoping that whoever's watching will also read and figure it out for themselves.
Hmm. And there's one thing to, for example, read a textbook about the dinosaur age, and then there's another thing about actually being there and witnessing the dinosaurs in person. I'm using that metaphor because you've, since 1979, been an investigative journalist on all of this stuff, UFO related, alien related. But there was a moment where you were taken to Mount Shasta, where you had your own close encounter experience with a being called Antarell, if I'm getting the name correct.
Yeah.
A time traveler from maybe the future. What was that experience like for you?
I have to preface, I'm going to preface, this is not going to sound like a teacher and stuff, because I taught high school for 40 years and 15 of them at the American Overseas School, a bit Rome and Italy, private American school. So I'm going to sound like a teacher. I realized that in the 1950s and 60s, human type aliens were coming off spaceships and speaking to people like George Van Tassel, Howard Menger, George Adamski, or Feo Angelucci. And they were human. And they said they came from Venus, but I mean, maybe they didn't. But we know Venus, so it's easy for us. So I began studying that. And it was 1950 to 1963. And I mentally were going, well, where'd these guys go? They're not around anymore. Well, they're not going to be around because at that time in the 1950s and 60s, it was the beginning of the new age, Emilio, and they had Yogananda in California. Yogananda brought Eastern religion, okay, to California. Everybody read the autobiography. Everybody in the world has read the autobiography of a yogi. So whoever these aliens or ETs or human ETs were, they figured, let's jump on the bandwagon. These people already, are already going into the.
They're ready.
They had Maharishi, and there was like Est and L. Ron Hubbard and all that. So in Palm Springs, they used to have, and I could do a whole lecture on this. They used to have 33,000 people go to these UFO conferences, and then you got Van Tassel creates the Integratron, which is not only a time machine, it was a rejuvenation chamber. And I've spoken to the people that were involved in those days, and these human type aliens were they were coming off the ship. That's how they went to Van Tassel. The irony to me, as I'm doing the research, is that Van Tassel was working for Douglas Aircraft and Orfeo Angelucci is working for Lockheed Martin. And he meets a guy named Jupiter along he calls himself Jupiter. I mean, I think these ETs use what we know. But anyway, this is 1953. Does anybody bother to go back there? 1963 comes, we have Betty and Barney Hill and the abduction, and now the whole field is abduction. And I've been able to, mentally, I'm going, you don't need 40 years of DNA testing. Otherwise, you're pretty stupid. You can get DNA off of glass. So I'm convinced that the whole abduction thing is created to keep people in fear so you won't look at the fact they're like us. So where did they go? Where did they go? Peru, the Chilca Desert, to Sisto Paz Wells, Charlie, his brother, 10 young guys that were in that Rama group. And I happened to interview Ricardo Gonzalez, who was from Peru, who now lives in Argentina, about these human type beings that are contacting these young guys in the Chilca Desert. Now, it doesn't just happen. What they do is they camp for 3 or 4 days, they fast, and they meditate. And Ricardo's situation, he does like 2 hours of which is the vibrational chant, ironically from Tibet. If you look at a lot of the spiritual part of this, it comes from Tibet. It comes from the Eastern Bloc, the Eastern religions. They're not religions, philosophies. Thank God they're not religions. They are philosophies that compassion, kindness, love, and so forth. So what happens is I'm interviewing Ricardo Gonzalez and Enrique Villanueva and Claudio Vela and Sisto Paz and his brother transgendered into Veronica Paz Wells. I mean, I even went to Canada to interview her. So I went on a location and I ended up in the Chilca Desert, just where all this happened. I want to see. And from Mongolia, Ricardo goes to Mongolia, which is, in China, northern China. I get this message saying, Antarell wants to meet you in Shasta. And I say, no. You just want...
Did you know who that was at that point?
What year was that, 2014?
Did you know who Antarell was at that point?
Because I just interviewed him. I read his books. It doesn't matter. I don't, I'm a nuts and bolts journalist. I'm not going to believe everything. I mean...
So you wanted to meet him?
No.
Antarell?
Because I didn't believe it. He was even real. I mean, what is that? I believe everything? If I believe everything, there's a lot of crazies in the field. I'll be meeting all these, people from all over. Ricardo was in Mongolia, though. He was getting messages. And when I said, no, I don't camp, I'm not going to Shasta, he texted me from Malaga. You know where Malaga is, right?
Yeah, south of Spain.
Hey. And he said, we'll pay for you to come. You do have to camp. And he really wants to see you. And at that point, I just jumped off a cliff and said, okay. And I ended up in Shasta with 200 people, all speaking Spanish. And he gave me an interpreter who was Italian. He gave me Corinas. So, because everything these guys do is in Spanish. I've attended so many of these lectures. They're all in Spanish. Not only Ricardo, but Enrique Villanueva, Sisto Paz. Sisto Paz was the original. He's the godfather of the Rama group. And the thing is that in order for me, language can't be an obstacle. And I understand Italian. So Spanish is, I can't answer them, but I can understand it. So I did go to Shasta. They did give me a one-man tent. They didn't tell me they were fasting. I had an apple I had to cut in 16 pieces to live for 3 days. Yeah, I cut it and I just had a bite a day so that I could live. I mean, I couldn't believe they were doing this. And I couldn't wait to get out of there. On Sunday night, this was the deal. Ricardo Gonzalez's work is so precise that they tell him the exact time that they're going to fly over. So they had told him Sunday at 8:30. So I was sitting next to Fernando, and all I could care about, it was the last day. I wanted out of there. I was starving and I was freezing from camping. So it isn't like I really believed anything. So I was watching at 8:30 this craft flew over, and I said thank God it's over. I go home. But then Ricardo came to me. I was bundled up in a quilt, and he said, Antarell is in the forest, can you handle it? Well, Ricardo said there would be a Zendra, and there was a little tree, and this white mist came up, and I was holding Mercedes and Suyapa's hand. So Ricardo's wife and Karina were already there, down at the beginning of the forest, and I saw a 10-foot tall giant man. I mean, giant. He was very tall, very built. Um, for me, I saw him with a hoodie and like almost a gym suit on with boots. And I saw from far away as I was walking down there, Ricardo's wife's soul walking towards him with her arms spread out as if she was going to hug him. And I could see her clearly because she had on a white parka, a white jacket, white down jacket. And my first thoughts, even though I saw the giant man, I was for soul, don't touch him. Because as I mentioned before, in other cases, especially Virginia, the policeman that touched the being died 2 weeks later of tumors because you don't know what you're dealing with. So my thoughts were, don't touch him. He was standing against the tree. I got to the place where I was supposed to stand, and Ricardo told me to let go of Mercedes' hand. It was on the right-hand side. And that was the most terrifying time of all, because as long as I had somebody's hand, that was fine. This was witnessed by 5 people. Karina, who was already there, was Soul. It was me, Mercedes, Gonzalez, and Suyapa. And the man was in front of me speaking in an echo type word. It wasn't in my head. I could hear it in all of the forest. In a language which I could not understand. And they told me later it's called Irdin, Irdin. That's an ancient language. And I just didn't know what to do. Okay, so there is no protocols for contact. It is not that easy. I didn't know what to do. I was looking at him, he was looking at me. And you must understand that there was a post-traumatic stress connected with this because it shattered my entire reality. I'm very nuts and bolts. I'm very concrete. Everything ever I've done is concrete. And to see this, I had read Ricardo's book, so I knew all about Antarell. He was from Apu, that his base is in the mountain of Huascaran, that the Apunians had warned Vlado Kapitanovich about the earthquake, that he was the head of a hydraulic plant. The Apunians are people. And one of them is standing in front of me in Shasta. So at the end of about 3 minutes, and it looks like I'm the only one that heard the echoes and talking, he says in a robot voice, thank you. He turns around and he walks into the forest. I can hear him walking on sticks or whatever he was walking on, but he could have been floating because it wasn't a regular walk. So He just did one turn and walked away. We all saw the same thing, but everybody did not hear the same thing. Okay, so I heard robotic voice. Thank you. Not in my head, but in the forest. So I asked Ricardo about this, and he said, he's thanking you for the work you're going to do from here on in, not for the past. This was 2014. I came home and I had all kinds of paranormal stuff go off in my house. My phone was doing Morse code. I had all kinds of synchronicities. I had all kinds of paranormal activity. So, Emilio, I came to the conclusion that the way the ETs talk to you is not that they tell you whole sentences and, talk to you. They have a series of synchronicities and a series of electrical anomalies, including the number 1111 was coming up everywhere. So I they you got to figure it out. It's like they give you a language, you got to figure it out. In my case, if it sounded like Morse code. It was beeping all the time. When I had my second encounter, which was a hologram, I, in a dream, where my alarm clock went off every hour on the hour. I mean, I'd shut it off and it would come on again at 2 o'clock. I'd shut it off and come on again at 3. I want you to remember what the message from Antarell was. If you will lead, we will match your efforts. So I wrote it down. So do I ever expect to have that again? No. The assignment was the assignment. If you will lead, we will match your efforts. If you do something, we'll help you. Otherwise, if you do nothing, we're going to go home. And that's just one species of ET. That's just from Apu. Apu is in the constellation of Alpha Centauri. It's 4 light years away. They say they are time travelers. They say they have taken our kids off the planet. And they say that they have put together our DNA. And they say they did it in a place called Alma in Chile. So I've been to the Atacama Desert in Chile. I could not go to Alma. Ricardo went to Alma. It's 15,000 feet in altitude. And when Ricardo, Alma means liftoff. When he went there, he saw about, I think it was like 20 radio telescopes from all over the world. NASA had radio telescopes there. China had radio telescopes there. United States, South America had radio telescopes on Alma, which is an installation in Chile. So if they say that's where they took the kids, that in the future we've had a nuclear disaster, then I have to wrap my mind around something as crazy, as nutty as time travel. So do I do it? I try. So did we have a nuclear, deal and they had to take the kids from Alma? They call them, read Ricardo Gonzalez's book, Contact from Planet Apu, #1, and the rescue intervention. The book is called The Ark. The Ark. And it's in English and Spanish, like Noah's Ark. So that's part of my research. It is not all of my research. I have to look at Latin America and the messages coming out of Latin America. And when I was in the Atacama Desert, in the Valle de la Luna, the message Ricardo got, and the ship was over our heads then, was ecological. We would have problems with water and storms, and it's happening. So do people even care? They're so busy looking at Washington, D.C., and the 1 or 2 pilots that see Tic Tacs that they don't realize that we are responsible for this planet, which the Latin Americans call Pachamama. So that's in nucleus my journey from looking at human type aliens from the 1950s to Latin America in the 1970s to Billy Meyer in 1979 with the Pleiadians that came to Switzerland. And by the way, the conference where I was with Britt Elders. She's released the Billy Meyer book, Contact from the Pleiades. They staged this with Billy Meyer, the Pleiadians, 1978. There was no Photoshop until 1990. And the messages were, we are your relatives. Um, and we are evolving. You need to evolve. So I went to Switzerland to see Billy Meyer too. But what I want to tell people is to get the book, Messages from Ladies, because Lee and Britt Elders, who were with Wendell Stevens, did a 7-year research study on the photos, and they went to JPL, Pasadena, Boeing. They went to all the major companies, the metal and the movies, which the Japanese ended up buying. So, have we had contact with human type? Absolutely. Starting 50s, 70s, in Latin America in the 70s, in the 80s. And it is a historical academic study. Now, did my contact change me? Yes, because the agenda is spiritual, not religious, spiritual. It's wake up, otherwise, you will destroy yourselves. It is treat people with a collective consciousness. I mean, Christ had a collective consciousness. Do what's good for your brother, and then you won't do bad things. Collective consciousness. These cultures have had to have a collective consciousness. Otherwise, if they were all selfish and they were all into number one themselves, they would have destroyed themselves a long time ago. So try to do what's good for everybody, which is part of the Eastern philosophy too. So that's my conclusion, that there is a spiritual consciousness component. Consciousness, remember, you can extend it to the plants in your house, to the trees, to the planet, to your thinking, your brain waves, your connections. So, I mean, I've done all the data collecting. I've written 7 books of interviews. I am only now, right now, in 2025, interested in consciousness. And there isn't a lot in the United States. That's why I gravitate towards Latin America and Japan.
I'm going to pull a few quotes from you. One saying, the more you notice weirdness, the more it happens. So regarding your encounter experience, you started to have all these synchronicities follow that. I think it's because we're interacting with beings that are closer to source in their consciousness. And right now, us as third density beings, we're like the farthest separate we could be from that source. So the more we touch source, the weirder things get, in a good way. And the second quote is, whatever consciousness is out there, it will respond to you if you are very sincere. So you mentioned that there's no protocols for contact. If you were to design a protocol for contact that includes this sincerity factor, what would it be?
Well, you're going to think this is weird, Emilio, but food has to do with it too. Food and drink has to do with it too. Water, a lot of water, a lot of, you know, watch what you eat. Watch, because if you're digesting, you can't um, get into that alpha state. Watch what you're thinking. A lot of the pollution today, especially in the United States, I don't watch TV here. I watch, I'll watch, I love ancient Chinese fantasy dramas. I like kung fu and all that. You can pollute your mind as much as you can pollute your body. So you have to watch what you let into your mind. I love music. So what happens is if I can stay, you said sincere, I think the word is pure. And if you can stay as pure, water, good, healthy food, don't pollute your mind, stay in a state of balance. If you can stay balanced, then it's easier to interact with what you call the paranormal. But I was always having paranormal. I just didn't understand what it was. I mean, ever since I was very young, I had paranormal. I mean, you wouldn't believe my life. It's crazy. But I just didn't understand what it was. I came from confusion more than I didn't put an overlay. I didn't interpret. I didn't judge it. I didn't know. And even today, if you ask me what the answers are, I still don't know. It's a process. It is not you go to the finish line and you know the secrets of the universe. It's the process. It's the walking the walk. It's the doing the investigations. It's living your life. It is not, there is no answer. I always say the answer is there is no answer. It's the process that's really exciting. And since your awakening, you said you notice things. Well, that's it. You're awake, so you notice what you didn't notice before. So I'm noticing things, numbers, um, people. I had all these angels to help me out at my old age. I just had angels at the airport, and I go, where'd they come from? Or, I see these people go, what's going on here? I spend a lot of time with wow moments. Wow, what's going on? Confused. I have not put labels and answers on stuff.
Hmm. What do you mean when you say that we have ETs that look like us walking amongst us?
Well, that was a shocker for me to do Adamski, Howard Menger, Orfeo Angelucci, because I went to talk to all those people that were involved with the early days. So I, started getting involved with people that are doing the studying of the giant rock group. And one of them is Michel Zerger. He's French. Michel, Ziger. And he lives in Tokyo. He married a Japanese lady. And he's from Paris. And he was telling me about Adamski. So then I began to study Adamski. And when I met Glenn Steckling, he showed me a Polaroid of Adamski lecturing in Europe, and he said one of these beings is an ET that says he's from Venus. Which one? He showed, and he asked me which one in the Polaroid was big. And there was this guy dressed in a suit, blonde hair, that looked like a male model. And I said, it's him. It's him. He's ET. And
They're just more beautiful than us.
and said, yes. So remember, this is Adamski. People should go back and read Adamski. I met Desmond Leslie by accident in Italy, who wrote the Adamski books. I met him. He was an RAF pilot when he was talking to Colonel Corso. But at that time, I didn't know in 1998 who Adamski was. I was so ignorant. So Michelle was telling me that he is studying Adamski. He's going to write a book, and he and his wife are in a restaurant in Tokyo named Prego. I've been to Tokyo now, so I know where it is. And he said this beautiful blonde guy walked in who looked like a model. He doesn't belong in Japan, obviously. He ordered a latte. He went to a table behind Michelle. Michelle is working on Adamski and George Hop Williamson. Remember, he's working on this. The guy is there. On the way out, he hands Michelle Zerger a napkin, and in French it says, Nous sommes ici, we are here. In French, in German. And I said, okay, whoa, he knew you were French. He writes, We are here. I said, that's the title of your book, We Are Here, Visitors Without Passports. He said, yeah, he left his latte back there and walked out. So I'm convinced that a lot of these ETs are walking among us. So how did he know that Michelle thought when he walked in, I wonder if he's not from here? Then Timothy Good tells me a similar story. Timothy Good, who I consider an incredible researcher, he's a field researcher like me. He travels the world. In fact, Timothy Good went to see Remy Bach of Trinity. He went to see him, and it's in Timothy Good's book, that crash story. He did it before me. But Timothy Good said he was in a hotel in London, and there was a good-looking guy, dark hair, three-piece suit, reading a newspaper. And Timothy got a feeling that this man was not from here. So he said, mentally, if you are not from this planet, take your middle finger and put it on the left side of your nose. And the guy did that.
Telepathically.
Rolled up the newspaper and walked out. And then I began to collect all kinds of stories like that.
Wow.
So my conclusion is, if they know you are working and you are working sincerely, and you don't want to, this doesn't become about you and being famous and making money and all that, I think they will make themselves seen and heard. I believe, just to say, like Antarell, thank you. They'll do it, and then they'll disappear. They won't be with you. They don't become alien gurus and channeling gurus and all that. They just do it. They appear. They say thank you, and they go. And I've learned this in my old age because, unfortunately or fortunately, the field has become filled with gurus, people that chat. I call it aliens on demand. I don't think you can control an extraterrestrial when he wants to appear, when he wants to talk, when he wants to do his thing, or her thing. I think that there's an agenda to all of them. There's a reason why they talk to you. There's a reason why they appear. There's a reason, and it's not about you. You're just the tool. You're just the way they communicate. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you there, obviously there are many different agendas, but what have you seen are the main agendas for these beings that are here right now and that people are beginning to see as well?
The evolution of human consciousness. That's the bottom line. It's not about Star Wars or ships or technology. It's about wake up. Wake up. You people should be at another level right now, not in the Cold War, which we're in right now, the 1960s. It's the evolution of, and it's an individual disclosure. It is not from any government. There's no reason why the government would. What would they talk about having back engineered stuff years ago? And because their agenda is different. It's an individual disclosure. If they contact people, it's an individual journey. Hopefully, the people will get together. I was telling you that for me, John Lennon's song "Imagine" says it all. It says it all. Bob Dylan's, the times they are changing. And by the way, I knew Bob Dylan because I date back to the Newport Folk Festival. All the poets, the music, the messages from the universe. We need to start listening. And then in the end, it's love, compassion, and come together. Come together. You are one species on this planet, human, no matter what color, background or whatever. You are one species. It is not time to put a Chinese flag on Mars. It is not time to put, an American flag on the moon. I mean, this is crazy thinking. It should be the family of man. It should be for the young people, Star Trek. It should be like that. And the message is wake up. You guys are still adolescents. We want you to be responsible, mature, and so forth. And that's what I've learned. And I told you I was 79. I've been working at this for 45 years. I've done the best I can do with data. I have 7 books of interviews. People can go on Amazon. I did the best I could do. Right now, you can see my Japanese jacket. I find that my soul gets sped in Japan, in the Eastern countries, because I need to evolve also.
It's almost like the question that has been most on people's minds for the last few years is, are we alone? And what if the question now became, who are we when we realize that we're not alone? And I wanted to ask you, how would you feel that realization in and of itself would change humanity as a whole?
Well, I love it that you even put it that way, Emilio. I mean, my God, that's a great question. Nobody's ever said that. I mean, who are we? I think you have to like walk around and ask yourself that. My thought was, how come I have so many coincidences in my life and I get shoved here, there, and everywhere to do all this work? When did I sign up for that? And I don't like the idea of the word mission. It's not a mission because that's religious. This is not religion. I like the word assignment because for me, Antarell was more military. He was more of a strong figure. He was not. There's no religious anything there. It was more of a, I'm giving you an assignment. You want to do it or don't you want to do it? You don't have to do it. We're not making you do it. But if you do it, do a good job. And I'm going to just tell you the same thing. If you have an assignment, decide if you want to do it, and then please do a good job.
Another question that a lot of people want to know nowadays is, how do you know the difference between a UFO or a drone?
You don't. I mean, when I did 12 protocols of ufology, one of them is our stuff or their stuff. You don't. Because there's too much copycat stuff. For me, a sighting, I was in Sedona with the Sir Demi Lovato, who's a friend of mine. Demi Lovato had a near-death experience. She went into other dimensions, and when she woke up, she was filming UFOs. And all I can say is that if they let you see them, they're doing it to wake you up for a reason. You just don't see things for no reason. It's if there is a sighting, there's a reason. There's an agenda to get your attention. They don't do things just, I call it aliens on demand. However, if there could be, for instance, and I did see this, a mothership in Crestone and 2 F-16s following it, and it speeds off. There could be a UFO, and drones follow it. So you have a UFO and a drone. There could be the testing of our stuff, like a triangle in Nevada, and a UFO following that. So you got two different things there. It isn't one or the other. I usually look at the reason, where it is, what timing, the timing. I mean, if we're having war, like Clifford Stone said, 3 of his crash retrievals were in Vietnam. Then that they're there for a reason. There's an agenda. All those drones over the East Coast, I think, was a major distraction. They were distraction. Now, could some of them have been UFOs? Absolutely, sure. Could all of them? No. So then you get totally confused. So you ask me, can you tell it? I don't think so. Can't.
Well, I love the way that you put it in the terms of, if they allow you to see it, it's for a deeper purpose. And, I've had a few wild dreams lately that I think are preparing my own consciousness for more of this galactic contact. And I've had a few personal ones as well. One of them, I've talked about it a few times on the podcast, leaving the Great Pyramid in Giza. We were in there for 2 hours on a private access tour. And then I looked up to the sky. It was 11 at midnight, and there was a triangular shaped with no base at the bottom. So it was like this, like a V, lights on the bottom, completely silent, just hovering above the pyramid. And then it disappeared off into the distance. So those things do change you, because you're asking yourself the questions then, like, why was I shown that? And what are they trying to say? So it's beautiful. And, I'm still wondering, when you look into all this field, what do you feel has stretched your mind the most?
Well, first of all, going back to what you said, you could have seen that, and the person next to you didn't see it. So they allowed you.
Both of us. There was 2 of us that saw it at the same time, and we were both looking up. So,
all right, people want there to be more people, but when we did the work on Giant Rock, and we brought back Robert Short to do the channeling at Giant Rock in 2014, we all had cameras. Only one person took pictures of UFOs. We were all pointing at the same sky, and only one guy took clear pictures of UFOs. I said to myself, why couldn't I get that picture? I was pointing at that because they didn't want me to get the picture. They wanted David to get the picture. And so it gets really tricky. So we got pictures, but it wasn't my photo. What is the thing that the evolution of my thinking from data to consciousness, my journey from data. I worked with Alan Hynek for 6 years, and I was putting pins and maps. I didn't care what was inside. I didn't even want to know. And I was doing data collecting, interviewing people, interviewing the former defense minister of Canada, the astronauts, the whistleblowers, Colonel Corso. And the real reason, until I got to Latin America, the real reason is consciousness. So now I don't want to do any more data. Data didn't change a darn thing, changed nothing. We're still looking at the government for disclosure. We got the data. For me, what makes a difference is evolutionary, my thinking towards consciousness.
And you are a master at asking questions. So what do you feel would be the most important question that we can ask ourselves right now? And the most important studying that we could do to reveal more about ourselves in this process that we're unfolding?
Well, this is an entertainment. This is not a hobby. This is not something you do when you don't know what to do. This is the history of planet Earth. Because these things, the Chilka Desert, Giant Rock, the Maelstrom Air Force Base shut down, Trinity, all happened. These things happen. This is the history of a planet. You say, what does it mean? It's an individual journey asking ourselves, why do we care? Why do we get involved? Why am I doing this? What is it that I can contribute to the overall information that's out there? I think I did a lot. I did 45 years worth of, all the top level people, even Monsignor Balducci of the Vatican. When I lived there, he said his famous words to me were, the devil doesn't need UFOs. It's like I have all of these experiences with these mentor teachers, military whistleblower people. But in the end, Emilio, it's about us. Who are we? Where do we come from? What is what is our soul? How are we connected to the all-time universe? How are we connected to the stars? That's the questions that I want to do now. Heavy meditation, we all transition. So we transition into higher consciousness. It's more valuable to go there than to go to data. We have data. You could have as much data as you want. You and I had talked about talking about individual cases. We had talked about the Robert Limos case in Barcelona. Here I am hanging around Barcelona. I walk into a studio that's filled with beautiful paintings, and the guy that's the sculptor and the painter, he's a painter, an artist. The whole studio's got these beautiful looking people, a male and female, who have scales, and they're not reptilian, but they have scales. And I ask him, how come you changed your whole studio, all these, with these aliens in this ship? And he tells me he's going to a wedding in Fortaleza, Brazil. And after the wedding, he walked in the savannah in this huge mothership, and it's in his paintings. Comes down slowly, and he sees in the windows on top about 100 people, not little grays, people looking out, and a big picture window with a male and female. And it just glides over the savannah. And I said, what happened? He said, well, I wasn't into this. He said, it was a shocker, but he said it stayed there long enough. He said, so that I could kneel down in the savannah and watercolor paint them and the whole entire ship. And you could see a little white dot, that's him, painting. They allowed themselves to be painted. So the bottom line of this story, which is a Brazilian case, and there's the being, he said she looked very regal, like a queen. She looked like a queen, and he looked like a king. And they just stood there for me so I could paint that. And he said, the famous words, we are not alone. But they certainly weren't anything like I had seen before. Anybody that gets involved with interaction with non-human intelligence or ETs, it changes their life forever. So bottom line, this Brazilian case, even though he's Spanish, you can go to Barcelona and see his studio. His name is Robert Limos. Changes your existence. We are not alone. It's normal.
And not only are we not alone, but if we talk about time and dimensions, we realize that the soul is eternal and that there are infinite dimensions that we are simultaneously existing in. That was Dr. Joe Dispenza's main message in the advanced follow-up retreat that I just came back from. The theme of the event was Know Thyselves. And then the artwork that came with that event was a bunch of boxes, like infinite boxes. And each box said self, self, self. Like there are infinite versions of us, infinite selves. Like these aliens that we just showed up on the screen, that could be a parallel life of ours that we're actually living simultaneously. And just by seeing this picture, it could even just spark a remembering in people that, oh, like that's a fragment of my soul as well. So it goes really deep. Not only is it that we're not alone, but there's more to us than we know. And it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper.
Well, what you're talking about is philosophy also. And I mean, know thyself comes from the Greeks. I mean, the Greeks, philosophy of the Greeks, you know, they knew how to go there. In the modern day world, we are just so contaminated. I don't even know. Yes, we could be living. They could. What we could be looking at is a part of ourselves, of our soul, on another dimension. That part of this study is so advanced. It's in graduate school. And I'd love the idea you touched on it because I'm hoping we get to graduate school. I'm sick of elementary school. Is it really, is it real? What is it? Is it metal? Are they good or bad aliens? That's all elementary school. When you get past that and get into dimensionality, the paranormal, near death experiences, and everything, you get into the heavy graduate school materials, hopefully someday covered in universities. I haven't been able to find in my group of people that are, anything but entertainment. Certainly not any kind of academia. Certainly not any kind of philosophy, theology. My work, believe it or not, with Jacques Vallée's, Whitley Strieber's, and John Max at Rice University is in the Department of Religious Studies because they can't put it in the humanities. But it belongs in the humanities because there's science involved. There's quantum physics involved. ESP, all kinds of things. So, you think probably Paula's talking too much about academia and stuff like that, but it makes it legitimate. I don't have to argue whether this is real or not, and whether we're crazy or not. It is legitimate. It is a study that includes psychology, psychology, of course, with hypnosis and everything, philosophy, science, quantum physics, mathematics, language. It includes all of the humanities. And I'm waiting for people to get together and have an interesting conversation, enlightened conversation about this. So, all of our work that is at Rice is under the Archives of the Impossible, which I love the title of Archives of the Impossible. Yeah, what you're saying, and you're talking about Joe Dispenza, all of the people that are in this should be talking to each other. And the irony is they haven't read each other's books and they don't acknowledge each other. And if you're a woman like me, it even gets worse because I'm in a world of men. And there are very few women researchers. So I've had to go through the hell of having to be credible in order for people to take you seriously.
Yeah. And you're truly a pioneer in this work, Paola. And we end every show with a segment called the Final Trio, which are just questions that we like to ask at the end. Before that, where would you send people to connect with you, with your work, all of the amazing books that you're putting together, the research, and to go even deeper down the rabbit hole with what you've studied in your life? Where would you send people to do that?
Well, go to my website, Paola, I'm Italian, so it's Paola Harris.com. And there's my streaming channel. It's a TV streaming channel on Vimeo, and it has all of my work, including the panel on artificial intelligence that included Paul Smith, Jacques Vallée, Paul Hynek, Adam Curry, discussions about these things. My streaming channel, my YouTube channel has my interviews with the Latin Americans, including the friendship case in Chile. There was a friendship case in 1970 in Chile, the Chiloé case, the friendship case in Italy, 1956, all on my YouTube channel. And then most of all, I'm going to try to buy the original source, the books. That is Connecting the Dots, Conversation with Colonel Corso, all of the above and beyond, which has the Latin American contactees. Exopolitics, Stargate to a New Reality, which talks about time travel. And How Do You Speak to a Ball of Light, which talks about the orb phenomena. So and they're all interviews, so you don't have to read the whole thing. You read a chapter. Study it like you would anthropology or, anthropology, history, or geology. And that's where paulaharris.com. Now, I have 2 conferences in Crestone, Colorado that I bring people to, and they are in the deep mountains, and they're meditation type conferences. There's no commercialism in Crestone. And that is www.starworksusa.com. So I look forward to being with Grant Cameron and Britt Elders May 23rd and 24th there with me and a small group of people, so we can have these kinds of talks under the stars in Crestone. I do 2 conferences, one in August and one in May. And those 2 conferences, my books at YouTube and my streaming channel have all the materials that people can study this. So thank you for asking. And please, that young people get involved, because this has been a field where, I look around and there's just people my age, and I'm going, where is this going after we go? Where is it all going? Is somebody going to carry the baton with this amount of information and take it down the road? So please, Emilio, encourage young people to get involved and limit.
Yeah. That's the assignment.
That's an assignment.
For the final trio, the first 2 are personalized to the guests, and then the last one we ask at the end of every show. So the first one is, what's the most beautiful thing you've learned about humanity through your work with extraterrestrial phenomena?
That everything, including plants, can speak. Everything is consciousness. Everything. Even the furniture. Everything.
Yeah. If you had a few minutes to communicate with an advanced extraterrestrial civilization, what would you say on behalf of humanity?
I think we need an intervention. I didn't think so before, but I do now. We need an intervention.
What would we need to be intervened in?
I didn't hear the last one.
What would we need to be intervened in?
We need an intervention of an awakening. It's like I don't know if you knew about what is it, the harmonic convergence, when all the people got together in the world and meditated at the same time. Or when Michael Jackson says heal the world, or when he has a music video that has Earth song, and you see all the plants and the animals dying. We need an awakening that it's all in our hands, and we need maybe to be inspired to change things. I don't believe that an intervention is come and take over and show. I think we need inspiration to change things. We change things. So I'm looking for some kind of inspiration, some kind of intervention, uh, some kind of something that brings everybody together. That's not a catastrophe, but something beautiful, like a harmonic convergence, like get everybody together, you know, uh, singing a song or doing something.
And this final question, we call it the time capsule question. And it's really a question about legacy. When I really look into that question, it's about legacy. And it requires us to travel out a little bit into the future, around 15 to 20 years down the line. And the reason I chose out those timeframes is because I believe it's going to be a time in history when the young generations of today will be stepping more into leadership positions around the world. And just like any great leader that had great mentors, great resources, great tools, great wisdom passed down to them, you had the opportunity to leave behind a time capsule for these leaders that they would open in 20 years down the line. Whatever you put into this time capsule, it doesn't have to be anything physical. It doesn't have to be, something that you can hold in your hand. It could be something non-physical, a teaching, a book, a poem, whatever you would want to put in there. But knowing that the youth of today, when they're ready to lead and when they're ready to step more into leadership positions, they will open your time capsule and be equipped with the necessary resources and guidance to help humanity enter this golden age that has been prophesized for centuries. What would you include and put inside of the time capsule?
First of all, I think that we need to lead by examples. Forget words, forget sayings, forget anything. You have to walk your talk, lead by example to inspire people. And the time capsule, John Lennon's Imagine. There's nothing else. There's, just the song Imagine. I would lead the song Imagine. And music is a vibration. Music is important. And I think people should integrate all these disciplines in order to be enlightened.
I love that you would put a song in there, and we'll even invite the people that made it up to this point in the conversation. What song would they put inside of your time capsule? We'll make a little playlist, the Paola and audience playlist. So drop that right in the comments, and we'd love to hear what recommendations you put in there. Thank you so much for the work that you do, your leadership, for having the courage to step into a unknown field and find yourself, going through the weeds and really showing us the clarity inside of all of this confusion that's out there. Thank you for bringing the truth. Thank you for just everything that you're doing. It's a pleasure to connect with you. And I know this will be the first of many, many more collaborations. Thank you so much.